Hello, anatomy colleagues. This is Dr. Alsup, and in this video, we will be discussing the organization of bone tissue. We actually have quite a few learning objectives to work through, as this is a bit more complex of a topic, but we will take it one step at a time and highlight only those areas that are most important. So let's jump right into it. So there are two main types of bone tissue organization. We are going to have compact and we are going to have spongy bone. And when we think of bone, we are usually thinking of compact bone. That is the type of bone that is visible because it forms the external layer of all bones. It also forms the bulk of the diaphysis or the bodies of the long bones. And it's called compact because it doesn't look like it has any spaces and the bone is compactly organized. Spongy bone is so named because, well, it looks spongy, or it looks like a sponge when you are looking at it. There are visible spaces to the naked eye, and all spongy bone is located internally within a bone. And so it's going to form the majority of short, flat, and irregular bones. And it will also form the bulk of the epiphyses of the long bones. But remember, all spongy bone will still have a layer of compact bone that covers its external surfaces. And this is very evident when you are considering a flat bone. In this example on the right, this is a cranial bone. You will have compact bone on the external as well as the internal surfaces. So in the case of the flat bones, this would be the skull. And there's no visible spaces there, although when you're looking microscopically, there are actually small spaces throughout for the osteocytes and neurovasculature. And then between the compact bone will be the spongy bone. In the case of skull bones, the spongy bone is called the diplo or the diplo, which you don't need to know for our assessments, but just for your information. And you can see those visible spaces throughout. Before I get into the finer details of the organization of compact and spongy bone, I do want to note a few other names you may hear when you're talking about compact and spongy. Compact bone is sometimes referred to as cortical or dense bone, whereas sometimes you'll hear trabecular or cancellous bone rather than spongy bone. I will be using compact and spongy for the rest of the discussion and for the assessment, but wanted to note that these are some pretty frequently called names for the same thing. So just in case you hear that. All right, I want to spend the majority of our time discussing compact bone, and most of it's organized into these repeated structural units called osteons, more traditionally referred to as Haversian systems, but we're going to use the term osteons. These are going to be aligned in the same direction within bone, and they're going to be parallel to the length of the diaphysis, which is aligned along those lines of stresses. And because of this organization, the diaphysis of a long bone resists bending or fracturing, even with that considerable force that could be applied at either end. Now, these lines of stress are dynamic. So if there's an increasing stress to a certain region, say you learn to walk, newer osteons will form to address that. Now, the structures within an osteon work in a mini system, which is very much in communication with other osteons. And the major structures of an osteon are going to be concentric lamellae, which will surround a central canal. And the central canal will contain neurovasculature and lymphatics. So that includes arteries, veins, nerves, and again, lymphatic vessels. So very important in terms of the functioning of bone. And then surrounding these central spaces are circular plates of mineralized extracellular matrix. And interspersed in there will be these small spaces called lacunae where osteocytes actually sit. And recall, these are those mature bone cells that are important in bone metabolism. So the osteocytes send their processes in continuation of the space called canaliculi, and this allows for the osteocyte processes to communicate with other osteocytes. And this makes it a really interconnected system throughout. Now, as I mentioned, you must have a good neurovascular supply to the bone in order for it to function, and this will traverse those central canals. But in order to reach the central canals, they need to traverse what are called perforating canals, more traditionally called Volkmann's canals. And these are located transversely in the bone from the periosteum internally. And these will link up to the central canals throughout, as well as the larger medullary cavity. And these perforating and central canals are lined with endosteum, similar to the medullary cavity as well. A last structure of compact bone that I want to discuss are called circumferential lamellae, not to be confused with concentric lamellae. These are going to be much wider lamellae that are arranged around the entire outer as well as the inner circumference of the shaft of long bones. So the outer circumferential lamellae is what you can see when you're looking at bone directly deep to the periosteum. And although you can only see the outermost portion of that outer lamellae. The inner circumferential lamellae will line the medullary cavity and is more closely associated with the endosteum. These lamellae are particularly important in something called appositional growth, which is a concept we will discuss more in another video, but plays a big role in terms of bone remodeling. All right, we have spent the bulk of our time talking about compact bone, so let's switch gears and discuss spongy bone. The bony tissue in spongy bone is not organized into osteons. Rather, the tissue is organized into structures called trabeculae. And trabeculae literally means little beams, which makes sense because that's very much what they look like. The spaces in between these trabeculae are going to be filled with marrow and vasculature. And it may look like trabeculae are disorganized, but they are precisely organized along lines of stress. The reason it looks different than compact has a lot to do with the location of this type of bone and the types of stresses that occur to that part of the bone. So spongy bone tends to occur in parts of the bone that are not heavily stressed or where stresses are applied from many different directions. And so the arrangement of those trabeculae can be changed as the lines of stress change. An important characteristic of spongy bone is that it's relatively light compared to compact bone, and this helps to reduce the overall weight of the bone. So that'll allow for bone to move with more ease when pulled by a muscle than it would be if all that bone was organized in that compact, heavier manner. Excellent. We have reached the practice question, so let's see how we do on this. Which structures associated with compact bone directly surrounds a central canal? So take a moment, pause if you need to. And when you are ready, I hope we are landing on that C, concentric lamellae is the correct answer. Recall that a central canal is going to be in the middle of an osteon. And surrounding that central canal are these ever increasing diameter concentric lamellae, all right, to be within one osteon. Circumferential lamellae is not right. It surrounds either the most external surfaces of the bone or with the inner circumferential lamellae, the medullary cavity, not the central canal. You have perforating canals. They do not surround a central canal, but they do communicate or interact with a central canal. And trabeculae, that's not correct either. Those are those beams of bone in spongy bone, so not associated with those central canals. All right, hopefully you felt good about that question and answer. If not, no worries. Just pause here and review these concepts before moving on to the next video. Thank you so much for your time and attention.